At 18 years old, Ice Cube helped write an album that sold 3 million copies and got handed a check for $32,000. He never forgot that number. 30 years later, that same kid from South Central owns an entire professional basketball league that's about to become the first sports league in American history to sell stock to the public at a valuation of $290 million. This is the story of a man who got robbed young and spent the rest of his life making sure he owned everything. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Basketball League. He built from scratch. Let's start with the thing in the title because it's genuinely one of the most audacious moves any entertainer has ever pulled off. In 2017, Ice Cube, a rapper, an actor, a guy with zero background in running a professional sports organization, did something that sounds almost delusional when you say it out loud. He started his own basketball league. Not a team. Not an investment in somebody else's league. An entire league built from nothing called the Big Three. The concept was smart from the jump. 3-on-3 basketball, played by former NBA stars who could still absolutely play but were done with the grind of the full NBA season. Games with a target score instead of a running clock. Real rules, real competition, real recognizable names. He co-founded it with entertainment executive Jeff Quatnetz, and a lot of people in the sports world quietly assumed it would fold within a couple of years, the way most upstart leagues do. It didn't fold. It's now heading into its 9th season, playing games in NBA arenas like the Intuit Dome, home of the Los Angeles Clippers. It pulls in around 14,000 fans per weekend event and had more than 500,000 viewers on CBS, NBA Hall of Famer. Clyde Drexler serves as the commissioner. And then, in June of 2026, Ice Cube announced the move that turns this from a cool side project into something historic. The Big Three struck a deal to go public, to list on a major stock exchange in the 4th quarter of 2026 under the ticker symbol TONT for 3-on-3. The valuation? $290 million. If it closes as planned, the Big Three becomes the first publicly traded professional sports league in the United States. Not a team you can buy stock in, an entire league. And Ice Cube's reasoning for taking it public tells you everything about how his brain works. He said, essentially, that right now a fan can't participate in the upside of a team besides just winning. And since the league needs the fans to succeed, letting them actually own a piece is a match made in heaven. Think about that instinct for a second. Most league owners guard their equity like a dragon on a pile of gold. Ice Cube's first instinct is to spread the ownership as wide as possible, because he understands that people protect and promote what they own. It's the same reason the league is structured the way it is. 8 teams, with the league still owning some franchises in cities like Boston, Chicago, and Dallas, while independent investors own the ones in Los Angeles, Miami, Detroit, and Houston. He's building an ownership pyramid on purpose. And to understand why ownership is the obsession that runs through this man's entire life, why it shows up in every single deal he's ever made, you have to go back to that $32,000 check and the moment an 18-year-old realized he was being robbed. Chapter 2. The $32,000 lesson that built an empire. Rewind to the late 1980s in South Central Los Angeles. A teenager named O'Shea Jackson, you know him as Ice Cube, is the primary songwriter for a group that's about to change music forever, NWA. He wrote a huge chunk of the group's material. The debut album, Straight Outta Compton, dropped in 1988 and became a cultural earthquake. It, along with Eazy-E's solo record, sold millions of copies without any real support from mainstream radio, which almost never happens. NWA was, for a moment, the most dangerous and most important group in America. And on their 1989 tour, the group grossed over $650,000. So the money was pouring in. The only problem was where it was pouring. Because when the accounting shook out, Ice Cube, the 18-year-old writing half the songs, walked away from that period with somewhere around $32,000. He said it plainly in an interview at the time. When you contribute to the sale of 3 million albums, you expect more than $32,000. He pointed out that the group's manager, Jerry Heller, was living in a $500,000 house, driving a Corvette and a Mercedes, while Ice Cube was still living at home with his mother, driving a Suzuki Sidekick. The math didn't add up, and when he asked questions about merchandise sales and where the money was going, he was basically told to mind his business. So in 1989, he did the most dangerous thing an artist can do at the peak of success. He walked away. He left the biggest group in the country over money. Speaking of having the nerve to walk out on the biggest group in the country over a principle, a lot of what came next comes down to how the brain performs under pressure. That's the idea behind an audio series called the Genius Switch. It's based on the neuroscience of the flow state, that mode where focus and creativity click at the same time. And the whole routine is just listening with headphones a few minutes a day. It's a one-time $39, less than a single online course, and it's backed by a 90-day money-back guarantee, so you can test it on yourself with nothing to lose. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to what grew out of that walkout. And here's the part that became the foundation of everything. His new manager, Pat Charbonnet, drilled a lesson into him that he never forgot. Read the paperwork, get your own lawyer, own your work. There's a now famous story where a manager offered Cube a $75,000 contract to sign, and Cube, trained now to be suspicious, insisted his mother see the contract before he'd put his name on it. He was learning, in real time, that in the entertainment business the person holding the microphone almost never gets rich. The person who owns the tape does. That single realization, forged out of getting burned at 18, is the seed of the entire California empire. And he took it straight into a business nobody expected him to conquer. Chapter 3. How a Rapper Took Over Hollywood. After leaving NWA, Ice Cube didn't just survive solo. He exploded. His 1990 debut solo album, America's Most Wanted, sold over 1 million copies and reportedly netted him around $500,000, more from one album than he'd made in his entire time with the most famous group in the country. He followed it with Death Certificate and The Predator, stacking up millions in music earnings through the 90s. Just think about what that proved. The moment he owned his own career, he made more in a single year than the machine above him had ever paid him. The risk of walking away had been enormous. He said himself that leaving after reaching the mountaintop could have destroyed him, but it taught him to trust his own judgment over anyone else's. And music was only the first move, because Ice Cube looked at Hollywood the same way he'd learned to look at the record business. Don't just perform in it, own pieces of it. His acting break came in 1991 when director John Singleton cast him in Boys and the Hood, a critically acclaimed film about South Central that gave Cube instant credibility as a serious screen presence. But the truly genius move came in 1995, when he wrote and starred in a movie called Friday. Now here's the thing about Friday. Cube didn't just act in it, he co-wrote it, which meant he owned a piece of the intellectual property. He got paid a reported $2.5 million for it, but more importantly, Friday became a franchise that has paid him for decades. He understood the assignment: create the thing, own the thing. Then, in 1998, he formalized it. Ice Cube founded a production company called Cube Vision, and this is where he became a genuine mogul instead of just a movie star. Cube Vision produced the Friday sequels, the Barbershop franchise, the Are We There Yet? Films and TV series, and more. He was now the guy greenlighting projects and collecting the back-end profits, not just cashing an acting check and walking away. And his instincts as a producer were sharp. He cast a then underused comedian named Kevin Hart in Ride Along, and that film earned over $140 million. Across his career, he's appeared in nearly 40 films, but the real wealth came from the ones he owned. And the ultimate example of that ownership philosophy was still to come, when he'd turn his own life story into one of the biggest music biopics ever made. Chapter 4. Selling his own life story and owning it. In 2015, a movie came out called Straight Outta Compton, the story of NWA, the very group Ice Cube had walked away from over money 26 years earlier. And in the most full-circle move imaginable, Ice Cube was one of the film's producers. He wasn't a subject the studio was making a movie about. He was one of the people making the movie and profiting from it. The film was a monster. Made for around $30 million, it opened to over $56 million in a single weekend, the best opening ever for its director, and went on to gross more than $200 million worldwide. It got nominated for an Academy Award for its screenplay. And in a detail you genuinely could not script, the role of young Ice Cube was played by O'Shea Jackson Jr., Ice Cube's actual son, who looks and sounds exactly like his father. So Cube produced a hit film about his own life, cast his own kid to play his younger self, and collected producer money on the whole thing. That is ownership taken to its absolute logical extreme. Think about the arc here. At 18, the story of NWA was something being monetized by other people, while Cube got $32,000. At 46, the story of NWA was something Cube himself owned and controlled and profited from at the highest level. Same story, completely different side of the table. He'd spent his whole career moving from the person things happen to the person who owns what happens. And once he'd conquered music and film, he started looking at even bigger arenas. Because a man this obsessed with ownership doesn't stop at entertainment. He wanted to own institutions. Chapter 5. The Big Three Gamble. So let's come back to that basketball league because now you understand why he built it and why it was such a risk. By 2017, Ice Cube didn't need to start a basketball league. He was already wealthy, already a successful mogul, already comfortable. Starting a professional sports league from scratch is one of the single hardest, most expensive, most failure-prone things you can attempt in business. The graveyard of dead sports leagues is enormous. But Cube saw something everyone else missed. He saw a generation of beloved NBA players who retired in their mid-30s with plenty of game left, and millions of fans who still wanted to watch them. He saw a gap in the market, and he decided to own it. And he built it patiently. For the first several years, the Big Three owned all its own teams and ran as a touring league, moving city to city like a rolling all-star game. Then, starting around 2024, Cube flipped the model. He began selling individual franchises to outside owners and anchoring teams in specific cities, exactly the way the NBA or NFL works. The first team sold for a reported $10 million each. Investors started coming in, including some serious names, and in a fun twist, even Snoop Dogg became a part owner of one of the teams. Cube also made headlines offering Caitlin Clark a reported $5 million deal to play in the league, framing it as breaking barriers for female athletes. Piece by piece, an idea people laughed at became a real, valued institution, one that Ice Cube likes to point out has been ahead of the curve. When the NBA changed its all-star game format to include elements the Big Three had pioneered, Cube publicly joked, "Where should I send my invoice?" And now, with that $290 million deal to go public, the gamble has fully paid off. But the league is just one piece of a California empire that stretches into music, film, fashion, and a mansion by the water. Chapter 6. The California Empire. Everything about Ice Cube's life is rooted in California, specifically the Los Angeles area that made him. He was born and raised in South Central, and unlike a lot of stars who bolt for a tax haven the second they get rich, Cube built his entire empire in his home state. Today, his personal net worth is estimated at around $160 million, and it comes from a genuinely diversified base. Decades of music royalties from a catalog of 10 studio albums, box office and back-end money from nearly 40 films. His Cube Vision production company, his Big Three ownership stake, a long-running endorsement deal with Coors Light that's reportedly paid him millions since 2011, touring income from over 600 live performances, and his solo by Cube clothing line. He's not a one-revenue stream celebrity. He's a portfolio, which is exactly what you'd expect from a man who learned at 18 never to depend on someone else cutting him a fair check. And it's worth noting he didn't get there in a perfectly straight line. Cube has spoken about once building up a real estate portfolio of hundreds of properties and then losing much of it, and having to rebuild. That's the part of these stories that usually gets sanded off. The man took real financial hits along the way and grinded back, which is a very different thing from someone who simply rode one lucky wave. The diversification isn't just strategy on paper, it's the hard-won habit of a guy who's been knocked down and refused to stay there. And he lives where he came from. In 2016, Ice Cube bought a mansion in Marina del Rey, right on the water, for a reported $7.25 million. And that's where he lives with his wife Kimberly, to whom he's been married since 1992, which in the entertainment world is basically a miracle of stability. He raised his family in California. His son became a movie star playing him, and his whole business ecosystem operates out of Los Angeles. The empire and the man are both, fundamentally, California. But Ice Cube's ambitions in his later years stretched beyond just building wealth for himself. He started trying to use his leverage for something bigger, and it led him into genuine controversy. Chapter 7. The Contract and the Controversy. In 2020, Ice Cube did something that took him from entertainment mogul into the far messier world of politics and economics. He authored something called The Contract with Black America, a detailed proposal aimed at addressing racial inequality, covering everything from banking and lending reform to political and economic changes designed to close the racial wealth gap. It was a serious, ambitious document, and Cube was passionate about it. He wanted real, structural change, and he decided he'd work with anyone in power who was willing to actually engage with it. And that's where it got controversial. In the run-up to the 2020 presidential election, Ice Cube engaged with the Trump administration on the Contract with Black America because, as he put it, he was willing to work with whoever was in office to get something done for Black people. He caught an enormous amount of heat for it. A lot of people accused him of helping the Trump campaign right before an election, and the backlash was intense. Cube pushed back hard, insisting he was nonpartisan on this, that he'd approached both campaigns, and that his only agenda was results for Black Americans, not politics. Whatever your read on it, it's a real and complicated chapter, and it shows a man willing to take serious reputational risk for something he believed in a way that made almost everyone uncomfortable. It fit a lifelong pattern, honestly. Going all the way back to NWA and songs that got the group formally warned by the FBI, Ice Cube has never been afraid of confrontation or controversy. He's a guy who says the uncomfortable thing and takes the hit. Sometimes that's made him a hero, sometimes it's made him a target, but it's always been authentically him. And that same refuse-to-be-controlled streak is exactly what turned a South Central teenager into a mogul in the first place. Which brings us to what this whole empire actually adds up to. Chapter 8. The Man Who Owns Everything He Touches. So step back and look at the entire journey, because once you connect the dots, Ice Cube stops looking like a rapper who got lucky and starts looking like one of the sharpest ownership minds in American entertainment. Here's the through line, the single lesson that runs through all of it. Own the asset. He learned it the hard way at 18, writing songs that made everyone but him rich, and he never let himself be on that side of the table again. He owned his music. He owned his films through Cube Vision. He owned his own life story when Hollywood came to tell it. And then, in the ultimate expression of the philosophy, he built and owned an entire professional sports league, and is now taking it public so that even the fans can own a piece too. Every single stage of his career is the same move repeated with bigger and bigger stakes. Don't just get paid to perform, own the thing that generates the money. And he did all of it without leaving home. From the streets of South Central Los Angeles to a $160 million fortune, from a $32,000 check to a $290 million league going public, Ice Cube built a California empire that spans music, movies, television, fashion, and professional sports. And he kept the whole thing rooted in the city that raised him. Most artists who came out of that world, if they made it at all, made it as performers, dependent on the next check from someone above them. Ice Cube looked at that arrangement one time, at 18 years old, decided he wanted no part of it, and spent the next 35 years proving that the real power was never in being the star. It was in owning the stage. And he now owns an entire league's worth of them. If stories about how the biggest names turn fame into empires they actually own are what brought you here, subscribe to Black Status, and we'll keep delivering them. See you in the next one.